And we are with the guest of podcast 190 on the Simple Wholesaling podcast, Dominick Felix. What's going on, man? How you doing?
I'm doing amazing, man. We're having actually a really great start of the day, really great start of the month. I mean, within the first hour, a couple of my acquisition guys locked up 2 deals.
Wow.
Yesterday, I think between the three of them, we had one, but today we had two. Super great start of the day, and we're ready to have a really great month.
That's absolutely amazing, man. And I saw you on the schedule for this podcast interview, and I was really excited. I was reading over who you are, and you're from Jacksonville, Florida, and
Right.
you just started in 2017. Most of my guests, they started 10 years ago, 20 years ago. I actually just interviewed a guy who has been in the business for 46 years, and here you are, young buck, 2017, has done over 250 deals in the Jacksonville, Florida market as a wholesaler. And you have a partner, G. I'll let you kind of pronounce his name. And
Yeah, Gonzalo Corzo.
Gonzalo Corzo. And you guys are absolutely crushing it. So I'm just really excited about this interview and everything that you have to. I got so many questions for you because your systems are amazing and you're growing and scaling. Before we get into that, man, I just want to hear about you. Where does you come from and how'd you get in this business?
Yeah. So, you know, what I say a lot, and it sounds like an exaggeration, but it's also the truth, is I refer to myself as a grass cutting call center rep. I really, it's kind of a typical story, but it's cool and unique as well, as far as I really don't have any traditional or exceptional skills. I don't have any college. I did a year of college. I don't have any degrees or anything along those lines. I just wanted to really get into the working world. Basically grew up broke, so I just wanted to start working, making my own money. So I became a collections representative with Citigroup. Did really, really well. I did exceptional. I was probably the top collector on the floor for 3 years straight. And then I went into sales because you can make more money, and essentially I doubled my salary. So instead of like 30 grand a year, I was making 60 to 70 grand a year as a retention sales representative. And if you know, some of you know what retention sales is, and some of you do not. But essentially, it's probably one of the most difficult, if not the most difficult, sales positions that you can have in a sales career. Because when someone's calling a retention sales or gets transferred to a retention sales representative, they're calling a person because they have a really bad problem. They want to cancel and get out of the service period. So not only do you have to resolve the problem and turn them around with a complete 180, but you also have to sell something to them. So it's really, really challenging, as you can imagine. And there was a certain aspect of that position as to where I was always within the top three of that aspect for 4 years straight on a floor of like 300 to 400 people at a time. So I did exceptionally well at that. But just like when a lot of people hit their ceiling, it's just that I felt like I hit my ceiling. I didn't really have anywhere to go. After that, I don't have any college. I don't have any certificates, any specific accomplishments in any one specific area. And if I was going to start to get into management, I would have to take my 70,000, take a pay cut down to 40,000, and start a different career path outside of sales. I didn't really want to do that. So what I did was I quit my job and I started cutting grass for a living. I became a lawn maintenance technician, a grass cutter for residential homes. And within about 3 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks, I replaced my $60,000 to $70,000 a year salary with residential grass cut clients. I did incredibly well. And what I found out is that if I was gonna, if I was cutting grass, if I was gonna do the same thing for banks with foreclosed properties, I'll get about 3 to 4 times as much per grass cut cutting grass for bank-owned properties rather than residential customers. So what I started to do is I started fighting for those contracts. I started fighting for contracts to maintain foreclosed homes for banks because this is right around 2006, 2007, and we had a huge economic decline. Didn't really have this big economic awareness of the peaks and the valleys of the economy. I just happened to be in it at that time.
Mhm.
So I would fight for these contracts. I'd call, I'd apply, I'd fill out all types of paperwork, and I'd call and I'd fail, and I'd call and I'd get turned down. And you're talking about months and months of fighting for these contracts until I finally landed one of those contracts. right? I land one of those contracts, I start doing that work, I start making more money, then I land another, then I land another. And I'm going to fast forward about 4 to 5 years in the future. I got to the point where I have expanded that company across 8 states. We had over 100 field crews that worked for my company only. And we were doing foreclosure maintenance for banks. And I was able to capitalize on it because we were in a really bad spot in the economy. You know, there was tons of foreclosures. The economy was in the crapper. Um,
Yeah. Was
and
this in Florida too?
this is in Florida. This is actually in 8 states. So we
Yes.
covered about half the state of Florida, about 3/4 of the state of Tennessee. We had coverage areas in North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and then oddly we jump over to New Mexico, and then a bunch of markets in Chicago as well. And I might have missed a market in there somewhere. But it was a really, really cool experience. I started it from the ground up. Wasn't really into like mentorship. I didn't read any books. I kind of just did it on my own and went with my gut. And I think what got me through that was sheer persistence and not giving up and pushing to reach an end goal.
Mm.
And then a lot of people ask me, because I'm into wholesaling now and I'm not really doing that any longer, is, you know, if you're doing so great, why transition over? And the reason is because if, you know, the economy's recovered, you know, we're doing extremely well. The foreclosure inventory has gone down a ton, and I couldn't grow it anymore. I had all sorts of challenges, even though I was performing exceptionally well with my clients. They just didn't have the inventory, and I couldn't continue to grow it. Had real problems getting into other markets. So I realized at that point in time, it's time for a transition. It's time for a pivot.
Yeah.
So I met with my partner Gonzalo, right? Met with my partner Gonzalo. I was actually selling properties on the market. I had I don't know, 20 to 30 rental properties, and I started putting some of them on the market to sell them. And he had some investors from another market that wanted to buy inventory. And I figured out he's into wholesaling, which, because I bought and sold property, I found out about the wholesale industry, and I realized that, wow, that's probably one of the greatest ways to get properties at super deep discounts.
Hmm.
He knew about the wholesaling. I was very, very intrigued with the wholesaling. And I was looking at switching industries. So after selling, you know, 5 or 6 properties through him to his investors, we proposed a partnership, which is how we got into what we're doing today. And I know I'm going for a while, so
No, you're fine.
apologies if you got questions asked. But just one more thing with that, I just want to mention to everyone that, you know, sometimes people hear the fact that I built this other company, you know, and it was cranking out millions and millions of dollars every single year. I did not bring one red penny into building this wholesale company other than a $350 investment on our first marketing campaign for a direct mail campaign. And then we just kept reinvesting the profits from that point forward. And we can get into some of the details as we go through the interview, I'm sure. But yeah, there's a lot of great things that happen throughout that story, you know.
Yeah.
It was a cool
I want
transition.
to thank you so much, Dominic, for sharing your story, man. That's an amazing journey. And I love because you kind of go back to, you don't have a degree, and it sounds like you didn't have a lot of experience, yet you were in a sales company at first, and
Mhm.
it was a very hard. You had to take this client and turn them into a negative person that comes for a cancel, and then now you're trying to sell them something. You were in the top 3%, or one of the top tiers of that. Then you built an amazing lawn mowing company. So let me ask you, what do you think the difference is between you and I'm always fascinated by people who are really good about sales or building something, and you're doing that, right?
Right.
And I've seen so many people fail at that. So what do you think? What is it about you? Do you think is it the right place, the right time? Was it luck? Or do you think you have something different inside of you that helped you succeed in these areas?
You know, I'm so glad you asked that question because I didn't know the answer to that. Probably just before 2 years ago, I didn't know the answer to that question. I didn't know, like, so I was building this great mortgage field services company with the foreclosed homes for banks, right? And I would go to these annual trade shows for my industry.
Hmm.
And then I'd be sitting at these big dinner tables with my clients and then other companies like me in different parts, different regions of the country. And they are, you know, they're people that have achieved, you know, master's degree, bachelor degrees. They're speaking really well. I'm not into sports. I just like to work. So I
Hmm.
don't really know what's going on with the Cowboys or anything. And everyone's having all these fancy conversation about sports, high level conversations. And I'm kind of sitting there. I'm an introvert at heart, and I don't fit in. So I'm sitting there thinking like, how am I even at this table, right? How am I blowing these other people away with my company? They're less than half my size. Like how am I even here? And then I read a book by Napoleon Hill. Holy crap, I don't even remember the name. It's my favorite book.
Think and Grow Rich.
Think and Grow Rich.
Hmm.
Yes. I read Think and Grow Rich, and that book taught me what it is that I had. And it's the simplest thing in the whole entire world. It's just sheer persistence, right? It's just, some people think, might call it a chemical imbalance. It might be more referred to like a chemical balance inside of me to where I just don't give up on things.
Gotcha. And you think that that is the key, that most people give up, most people quit, most people get down on themselves, or they take long breaks, or they take those big vacations and just don't work that hard. And
Yeah.
you think that the biggest thing for you is just showing up each day and working your tail off.
I'm pretty certain of it. Yeah, I'm pretty certain of it.
Awesome.
There's more aspects to it. There's more pieces to that, but I think the biggest contributor is persistence.
Wow. That's cool. And do you feel like that can be learned, that someone can read a book like that, or can they gain that if they're not motivated sometimes? Like, can that be a learned behavior, I guess? We can.
Um, it's a really good question. Can it be learned? I feel like it can be learned. I feel like it all really depends. People are raised a certain way. I think if you get it while you're young, you can adapt to it quicker. If you're an older individual, and this is just a general blanket statement, if you're an older individual, I think it could be learned. I think it would be like a very gradual change for an older individual.
Yeah,
Um, yeah.
that's awesome. Well, hey man, thanks for sharing your journey. Thanks for sharing that tip. And I really want to get into your business today. So you guys started just a couple years ago. You've done over 250 wholesale transactions in the Jacksonville, Florida market. And I want to learn about your team. I want to learn about your system. So you say that you really focus on systems, number one,
Yes.
and you guys do it a little bit different than a normal. So I've had a lot of wholesaling guests on this show. Some people have their little nuggets here and there, and little tweaks, but a lot of it's very similar. You answer the phone call, you go out to the appointments, you get as many appointments as you can, you negotiate the deal, have a good follow-up system, and that's kind of how it's done. But you guys do it a little bit different with that. So I want you to talk about your company, your team, and your system that your guys are using.
Yeah, man. I think it's cool when I step back and I just have like a broad overview on what's going on. Right now we're in our studio because we do live sessions, and we have a lot of interviews that we do with people. But just outside the door here is a big open room, kind of a call center style setup, and we call it the boiler room, right? And we call it the boiler room for fun. Is it like the Wolf of Wall Street, the Boiler Room movie? We like to believe in our minds that it is, but it's not really. Most of the time it's relatively quiet. You hear a lot of typing. Then with wholesaling, you're trying to reach out to people. You're trying to get them on the phone. A lot of times they're not picking up. So sometimes it's pretty active, but a lot of times it's just neutrally active, remotely active. So
Mhm.
right out here is the boiler room, and the way we have it set up is the wholesale transaction. It kind of passes around from person to person. So it starts with someone that we call our project manager, right? And she does a ton of different things. On the bigger level, we have a list of like 1 to 200 different projects, things that we're currently working on, things that we want to work on in the future to continue to build our company and make it better and better, and just unique things that people haven't done yet that we want to get to eventually, at a certain point in our company. But a big part of what she does is really list pulling.
Mhm.
She pulls huge lists, specific lists, that we can target to reach out to ask them if they want to sell their properties. So it'd be lists like absentee owners, vacant properties, pre-foreclosures, 55 and older, tax delinquencies, things like that. So she'll pull these enormous lists. We'll skip trace them for phone numbers, And then we have a team of VAs, and this doesn't include the 13 that we have in the office. We have another 8 virtual assistants. And all they do is cold call for us. And that's our big thing. We're cold callers. 95% of everything that we do comes from cold calling. Any other kind of leads that we get are from other things that we're testing, like different ways to send out direct mail and ringless voicemail. And, we'll test out some pay-per-click stuff. But we really like the concept of cold calling. So we'll pull the lists, we'll skip trace them, we'll stick it all in the auto dialer, and our VAs will go to work just, good old fashioned picking up the phone and calling people. Once they get the people on the phone that say that they'd consider selling, and they answer our questionnaire, it comes back. It goes automatically into our CRM and creates a task automatically for our underwriter. So we have one person in the office all day long for 8 hours a day, every day, a lot of times overtime, and all they do is underwrite deals. They'll look at a deal and they'll say, is this guy just completely out of his mind? Is it worth sending it to an acquisition manager to try to negotiate and buy it? Or do we just mark it as dead and move on to the next lead? Or is it a great deal? What number do we need it at? He puts it through calculation. So there's 2 things that we do. Right, we do the typical wholesale calculation that a lot of people know, which is 70% of ARV minus repairs minus our wholesale fee. And then we also take a look at the market in the area around that in particular property to look at what other properties in that area in the same condition are selling for. And if we see that, it'll give us 2 options. Sometimes the wholesale fee, especially in this hot market, a lot of people, sellers will feel it's just too deeply discounted. And if we have the option to buy it for a little bit higher, because people will buy it for higher in that market, we look at that too. Gives us a little bit more flexibility, allows us to put more deals under contract. And we successfully sell a lot of them that way. So the underwriter will underwrite the deals. And then once we have our numbers, they'll send them over to our acquisition managers. Our acquisition managers will reach out to the sellers with their scripts and their pre-written rebuttals to objections and things like that. And then they'll go to work negotiating the deals. We like I said, we lock up 90 to 95% of our deals over the phone with negotiations over the phone, assumptions on repairs and things like that, and using DocuSign. And it's still it amazes me every single day, because this is weird to say because I like this process, but I would never let someone lock up my house over the phone with the DocuSign. So it just totally shocks me every single day I think about it, that people are accustomed to being able to do business that way. I'm happy about it, but it's just super shocking to me.
So I have some very specific questions on this particular strategy. So number one, it's a little bit different than the normal wholesale strategy. Like I said, our company specifically, we're doing appointments. We thrive off of scheduling 15 appointments or 20 appointments in a week and having the acquisition managers meet with people and all that. You guys do a little bit different. So number one, I'm going to do some rapid fire questions at you. So who answers the phone when, or I guess, so most of the time you guys are doing cold calling. So you guys are the one calling. You get an interested lead from the cold calling VA, goes to your underwriter. They check the comps, they check the deal. Mm-hmm. If they think it's worth it, then they send it to your acquisitions manager, mm-hmm. and they're the ones locking it up over the phone or negotiating over the phone. Yep. So a couple questions with that is, number one, you're not seeing the house, right? So what type of questions do you ask to get the information that you need to try to have a realistic conversation with the seller over the phone when you haven't seen the house?
So what we tell our people here in the office is since we're basically a phone sales company, we have to do our best to try and reenact a live appointment over the phone. So when we get on the phone with these people, it's not like a quick 5-minute phone call. We're going to get to the price, then we're going to rule them out and move on to the next. It just can't be like that. If we're competing with people that go into the field, we have to try to reenact it as best we can over the phone. And the best way to do that is to kind of prep the seller on the phone to know that since we're not out there, we have to kind of just tell them straight up, it has to be like a live appointment. So it's going to take a little bit of time because a real estate purchase is a serious purchase, and we take our jobs very seriously. We
Yeah,
take our
definitely.
investments very seriously. So your question was, what kind of questions do I ask to figure out the condition of the property?
Right.
I mean, most of it is super simple questions. It's just going through a good handful of them. It's questions like, when's the last time you've updated your bathrooms? When's the last time you've updated your kitchen? Does your property have any foundation issues? Most sellers are not really going to know how to answer that. They're going to say, I don't know. So you have to give them like little descriptive examples, like does it have cracks in the walls? Are any of your doors sticking? Things like that. So you can figure out, is there a chance it has foundation issues? When's the last time you replaced the roof? When's the last time you replaced the HVAC? Just questions like that. And it gives us a good idea on the condition of the property. And then it gives our underwriter enough information so that we can make an assumption on repairs. Now, he's not going to go through an extensive repair sheet and get an exact quote on repairing the property. He's going to do a generalized repair assumption based on a price per square foot calculation. So
Gotcha.
we'll have low repairs all the way up to heavy repairs, which ultimately would be a full rehab.
Gotcha. So does your acquisitions managers know how to underwrite a deal, or do you just put that in the hands of the underwriting person, that they're the expert and they just tell the acquisition manager what to offer? Does the acquisition manager ever look up deals? Do they try to figure out what to offer, or do you
So
have
the
someone specifically doing that?
So what the underwriter does is the underwriter um, calculates the repairs, does all the calculations for the offer price. We develop an offer range, and then we give that over to the acquisition manager. And the acquisition manager will also get 3 comps that justify the ARV, and they'll also get another 3 comps, which will be the lowest price comps in that area.
Mhm.
So they're actually given all the tools to go to work on the negotiation. They don't do any of the underwriting at all. Do they know how to underwrite it? Probably not, but they understand what's given to them and they know how to talk about it.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Very interesting. So it goes to your acquisition manager, and their goal is to lock it up over the phone. So you have a little bit of a longer conversation. You figure out what the house looks like by asking, when were the bathrooms updated, kitchen, what the foundation looks like, and then what's it kind of go from there? So they get the offer, and then the seller says that sounds good. So what's kind of the next step in your process?
Cool. So they'll DocuSign it over to them. They'll receive it via email. They'll click to sign. Either Gonzalo or myself will counter click to sign as the owners of the company. We'll have a complete contract, and then we have to go to work selling it. And the first step in doing that is really, really actually at this point getting out to go see the property. So we send our field guy out to go look at the property, get marketing photos, and ultimately check out the condition of the property to see how close we are. If we're super far off, he's going to come back with all the data, and we're going to renegotiate it to a lower price, or we'll have to back out of the deal at that point.
Gotcha.
But if we're relatively close, which it's so cool that in most cases we are relatively close, then we go to work marketing it to our buyers. So we'll
Mhm.
take all the photos, we'll prepare all of our marketing data, and we'll give it to our office liaison, who's really kind of like our buyer marketer. And then what she's going to do is she's going to email blast that property to tons of investors. She's going to put that property all over social media. She's going to upload it to some key websites like Craigslist, Bigger Pockets, and Connected Investors. And there's a good handful of other things that she does. And we try to get our outreach. One of our biggest things is really blanketing as much area, as much data, as much information as we can in all parts of the company. So, I mean, she's even trying to post it in areas that extend to other states like New York and Los Angeles and Chicago and things like that. So we can get a lot of those buyers that'll buy inside of Jacksonville, because within the last couple of years, Jacksonville has been kind of highlighted as one of the best investment markets in the U.S. And people in other states, especially the bigger markets, have a good wind of that. So we want to give exposure to our properties to those people in those markets too. So
Yeah.
she's going to be the next step in that process, and it drives emails, text messages, and phone calls into our company from all of the marketing that she does.
Gotcha. That's awesome. So, you do a lot of work on the selling too. A lot of times wholesalers, they get their buyers list, they build their buyers list, but then that's kind of what they rely on. But you guys take your property and you're really blanking it in all these different areas, which is so smart. And how many people work on your disposition team, by the way?
So the buyer marketer, she's an office liaison. She's kind of a hybrid position that ties in loose ends from different departments. So there's a lot of responsibilities that she does. So I guess she can be partly on the dispo side, but we had one disposition manager and one transaction coordinator. We just hired a second disposition manager as well. So that disposition manager is in training right now.
Awesome. Awesome. So I'm going to ask you for some different tools and some resources because I always love to do that. But before we get into that, I'd like to know percentage wise, like how many deals you lock up over the phone, and do you leave it with the seller that there could be a renegotiation after you inspect the property or see the property, or you just leave it, hey, sign the purchase agreement and they think you're buying it, and then when you do renegotiate, sometimes they're shocked, right? I would like to know, like, what's that conversation look like, and then percentage wise, how many deals do you think that you have to renegotiate or back out on that you're kind of off, right?
So I'm gonna say, I'll answer the second part first.
Okay.
I'm gonna say we're probably somewhere inside of 10 to 20% on the front end of deals that we have to renegotiate. And ultimately, on the back end, once we're marketing out, we're probably 40 to 50% on the back end of deals that we have to renegotiate or back out of.
Okay. So typically on the front end, they go out and look at the property. It's not what you thought. You might have 10 to 20%. But on the back end, if your buyers aren't buying it, then you have to go back. Now, when you go back, are the sellers shocked? Do you have a conversation with them before that could happen? Because I know sometimes you sign a purchase agreement, they think you're going to close it, and then you go back and renegotiate, and they're super mad. And
so we're pretty clear on the front end that we need investor approval on all of our purchases, and that's how we are able to purchase so many properties.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Interesting. Cool concept. I mean, you guys, obviously, it's a different type of program. It's a little bit less.
It's more of a guerrilla approach rather than a nurturing approach. I'll admit that. And that's, the way it's funny because, we don't exactly mirror a lot of other huge companies that are doing it this way, but the numbers that fall into place are very, very similar, as far as the percentage of renegotiations and deals that don't work out. It's super similar, and that's cool. That gives us peace of mind that that's really just what the model is, and it's going to be our challenge for a good long time to make those numbers as good as they possibly can over time.
Yeah, definitely. That's awesome. So I'm going to ask you for a couple of tools before we go to the next section of the show. So number one, skip tracing. Obviously, you guys do a lot of cold calling. Do you have any resources, companies that you use for that?
Yeah. I'm totally cool with giving all that information. So the way that and maybe this might be a mental thing, but I like the skip trace companies that only charge me for the data that they'll be able to find, as opposed to charging me for all my leads. So what I do is I skip trace using 3 companies simultaneously. I like to use datafinder.com. I like to use datazap.com. And I also like to use reimarketpro.com.
Awesome.
Right? DataZap, Data Finder, they're data append services that find data by scraping the internet in a lot of different ways. And then REI Market Pro, they get credit bureau level data. So they get a lot of phone numbers. A lot of them are no good, but some of them are really good.
That's awesome. Yeah, we're definitely going to put all these in our show notes, guys. So if you're tuning in, go to simplewholesaling.com/episode 190. And this is all going to be in our show notes.
Nice.
So Dominick, CRM, which one?
Got it. Gotta go with Podio, bro.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep,
yeah.
yep. That's the common one. That's the same one we use. We've used a few, honestly, but yeah, it's robust. It gets the job done, and we really like that.
Yeah, there's a lot
Um,
of great ones out there, man. There's a lot that could be viewed as better for beginners.
mhm.
Podio is just super customizable, and you can tell by the unique way that we're trying to build our company out. We need to work in particular fashion, so we need a CRM like Podio.
Yeah, definitely. Calling software. Do you guys have a certain call software do you use to track calls or anything like that?
Um, so uh, so the auto dialer we use is calltools.com. There's a lot of reporting in there, a lot of tracking, a lot of reporting. And then we also have a program that we use called Vumber.com, that provides voice over IP phone numbers. All of our acquisition managers, they have their own phone numbers. They actually have two phone numbers each. There's a lot of different personnel on our team that have in particular phone numbers that you can keep, you can throw away, you can replace, things like that. And we're using Vumber.com for that.
Awesome, awesome. Any other tools that you think would be really helpful for any listeners out there?
Oh man, you want all the secrets, man. You want all the let me think. Is there a unique tool that I like? I mean, you know, I would just say just an all-encompassing business program would be the Google Drive.
Mhm.
If anyone's not using Google Drive, it's really, really cool because it gives you spreadsheet tools, Word document kind of tools, PDF tools. It's universal storage, it's cloud-based storage. It allows us to be super versatile and share documents with team members, things like that. And if your one of your goals is to hire employees or build a team and scale, I think it's super essential to have something like that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thanks for all the tips, and yeah, I really appreciate that. And
You're welcome.
again, these are going to be in our show notes, guys, simplewholesaling.com/episode 190. And Dominick, it is about time that we're going to go in this section of the show that we like to call it Going Deep. And so a couple years in, man, you've been really successful so far with the various companies that you've done. And I'd like to know, what's the next 10 years looking like for you, man? Are you going to scale this thing and just blow it up? I mean, do you have any personal goals that you want to accomplish? I want to kind of hear your why.
Yeah, we're gonna scale this thing, man. That's the goal. We've been doing everything that we're doing solely in one market, in our home market. We're just a week, maybe two, of going into our second market, and we'll have a third market right behind that. We've got those markets decided upon. Our 10-year goal. Our 10-year goal is $100 million. Um, it's going to be a nationwide company using the concept of wholesaling that we're building around. We kind of have it measured out as far as what it's going to take to get there. So we have our 1 year goal, our 3 year goal, and our 10-year goal. So ultimately, to get to $100 million a year gross. It's probably going to take somewhere in the neighborhood of 750 to 1,000 employees to accomplish that. So we've got a lot of the numbers measured out on what it takes to get there. And our team's on board too. We have a quarterly vision meeting where we revisit our goals and our weekly goals, our monthly goals, our quarterly goals, and everything that we have to do to get to our goals. We don't always hit them, but we do always set them, and we get pretty darn close if we don't hit them. My why. So my company's name is Regency Litho Assets, right? It
Hmm.
doesn't have anything to do with real estate. Maybe assets does, right? But
Yeah.
Regency Litho. So litho is actually short for lithography, which means printing, right? And my biological father, he passed away when I was 1 year old, and he started a printing company. And guess what? The name of the printing company was Regency Litho, right?
Uh-huh.
The printing company that he started out of the house that I grew up in a small room in our basement, probably the size of just this is I don't know, a 12 by 12 room, probably the size of the room that I'm in right now. And then we grew up in Brooklyn, New York. And then he moved the business to an office in Manhattan on Fifth Avenue. I don't know the address of the building, but I know where the building is. Um, And then he expanded it to the entire floor of that building. Then he had aspirations and was negotiating a lease to go into 2 and 3 floors of that building. So he was really on the fast path to growth. And as he was building the printing company, he's one of the first printing companies in New York to print in color, and he had big contracts with companies like Playboy and Time Magazine and things of that sort. So he was really on the track of blowing up. So he passed away when I was 1. My mother sold the company, didn't really get a lot of money for it. She didn't really know what she was doing. She wasn't involved with it. We grew up broke, and I just feel like we pointed out earlier on the call, right? I have this like chemical balance in me where I just don't want to give up. I want to persist to do as great as I possibly can in life. And I feel like I have a weird, you can call it a gift. I was on another podcast. Have you ever heard of Steve Trang and the Real Estate Disruptors podcast?
Yeah.
So he asked me, what do you think your superpower is, right? And I said, you know what? And I hadn't thought about it. So a surprise question, right? So I said, you know what? I think my superpower is I just have a knack for figuring shit out. You know, any problem can be brought to me, and I would never, not ever once did I ever think I ever said, I don't know. I always kind of dial in and try to pick it apart and figure out a way to get it done. So I
Mm.
have a knack of figuring things out.
That's a good
Oh, and
superpower, man.
yeah, thanks. Thanks. So persistence and being able to figure things out, you mesh those together is, I think that's a big contributor to why we're doing so well.
Yeah.
Um, so
And,
yeah,
and you obviously think big. I mean, I think you're the biggest thinker I've had on the podcast. To do
oh,
the
thanks, man.
nationwide company, the $100 million, so many employees. That's awesome, man. And hope you're able to attain your goals.
Thank
And
you, brother.
sounds like you're on the right path. So
Oh, so what I was gonna say is I want to be the person to take the baton from my dad. You know, he was on to something, and I want to be the one to step up to take the baton and finish the job that he started.
yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome, man. Well, wish you the best with that. And, love what you guys are doing. You guys have done so well just in a couple of years. So
Thank you, man. Thank you.
getting your systems down and hiring, it sounds like more markets. It's, man, I'm with you with all that. So thank you again for being a guest on today's podcast. I'm going to end today's podcast just like we end all of them, and that's called A Touch of Randomness. So with that, I have 3 random questions that I have prepared for you, and just name the first thing that comes to your mind. These are just kind of fun, so don't think too hard about it. But number 1, if you could wholesale anything else besides real estate, what would that be?
Money.
Sounds good. Number 2, if you were in a witness protection program, what would be your new name and where would you go?
Paul Foster, and I'd go to Aruba. Paul is my middle name. Foster's the street I grew up on. Foster.
All right. Sounds good. Sounds good. All right. Last one. What is your favorite smell?
Coffee.
That's a good one. Me too, man. Me too. Awesome. Well, that's a wrap, Dominick. I appreciate you so much for being a guest on today's show. Learned so many nuggets. There's going to be so many resources in the show notes, guys. So please check that out at simplewholesaling.com/episode 190. But Dominick, I want to give you one more opportunity to say anything, any advice that you want to give the listening audience out there. And then also give your contact information. Where is the best place for someone to reach you?
Cool. So when a lot of people ask me how to get into the business or how to get more deals, I think that the tough part is just transitioning out of what we're used to doing into something new. And most people I talk to, they're working full-time jobs. So how are they really gonna do things like what we're talking about, right? It seems unreachable in a sense. So I truly think it's super important to time block your day. And I've noticed that most people working a 9 to 5 have about 2 hours they can probably dedicate to their businesses. So I think it's very important to do 3 things. I think it's very important to call people every day, call sellers every single day, underwrite deals, and then negotiate offers. Do those three things over and over and over. Most first calls are not going to get a deal, in my opinion. Other people's opinions might be different, but most first calls are not going to get a deal. It's going to be a game of follow-up. I remember stepping back and looking at, I had 9 contracts at one time. We have a lot now. We have I think over 30 properties in our inventory, but I remember looking at the fact that we had 9 contracts, and I wanted to see like how long did it take to get most of those contracts. So 8 out of 9 of those took about 2 to 3 months for us to lock down, and only one of them was from within that same week.
Wow.
So what's going to happen on that cycle is you're going to start building up your follow-up pipeline, your possibility pipeline, and then you're going to have to go back and start the cycle over and over and build the pipeline out. And before you know it, you will start locking a deal up here and a deal up there. And if you're just trying to transition out of a full-time job into this business, once you get a deal or two, you know, if you're making 10 to 20,000 a deal or two will help most people make that transition. And that's what we have to get to.
No, I think it's great advice, man. Great advice. What's your contact information for someone to reach out?
Cool, man. I'm super active on social media. So if anyone's on Instagram, look me up. It's real Dom Felix. And then it's just Dominick Felix on Facebook, and they can find me there.
Awesome. And you can check that out on our show notes again at simplewholesaling.com/episode 190. That's a wrap, Dom. I appreciate you, and I wish you, Dom and G, so much success in your future, man.
Awesome, man. Super happy to be on. Thank you so much for having me.